Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Please fill in up in the front here. We'd love to see your faces and love to make sure we have an interactive discussion. Again, my name is Kurt Volker. I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the McCain Institute for International Leadership, which is a part of Arizona State University based in Washington, D.C., and also based here in Arizona. I want to first thank all of you for coming. It is a tremendous audience that we have of CEOs, extremely capable, extremely interesting people. I hope you take part in the discussions today. It's not meant to be a passive environment where you're just listening, but we want to hear from you as well. I want to thank the host committee for the Super Bowl here, David Rousseau and Brian Rogers in particular, who have worked so hard to help put this event together. We're very, very grateful for the opportunity to bring to you some very interesting discussions about challenges that our country faces. The McCain Institute for International Leadership was established with the goal of promoting character-driven leadership in the United States and around the world. It is established to honor the service to our country of Senator McCain, of Mrs. McCain, and the McCain family going back generations. We decided as we built the McCain Institute, we didn't want to be just another think tank. We didn't want to have a lot of papers and a lot of conferences. We wanted to be focused on what we can accomplish. How do we be a do tank? And so we've taken on projects in the areas of humanitarian work and human rights. We're building in the areas of national security. We run a program to promote character-driven leaders from around the world, our Next Generation Leaders program. We're connected to ASU, and we teach foreign policy making for ASU students on a semester in Washington. So it's really grown into a rich and diverse set of programs that are aimed all at this mission of character-driven leadership. And that's what led us to today's event, because we thought together with the host committee that with such an accomplished group of CEOs coming to the Super Bowl, it would be a shame not to also have a day dedicated to substantive, smart discussion about challenges that our country faces, opportunities that our country has. And so we've put together discussions today to focus on domestic challenges such as human trafficking, which we're going to hear about in just a minute. Also, the U.S.-Mexico relationship and the opportunities there for building on our relationship with our closest neighbor, with a growing economy, with a Latin American economic capacity that rivals that of China when you put it all together. Also, the U.S. and China, the single biggest economic relationship driving some of the changes going on in the world right now. National security, we'll hear from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And also innovation, and innovation in doing something such as fighting cancer, which we'll hear about later on this afternoon. So that's the program that we've put together here. I hope that you find it engaging and interesting, and at the end of today, if you found this interesting, we'd love to hear from you, because we think that this has potential as something that we could do with host committees and gatherings of CEOs around the Super Bowls in the future as well. So if it's useful, let's hear from you, and let's see how we can organize that. To start off today, we're going to talk about human trafficking. And this is an issue, and Mrs. McCain led some events at Arizona State University yesterday using our decision theater, bringing in the Attorney General of Arizona, state representatives, people from the Phoenix Police. What is fascinating about this issue is how little known it has been until the last couple of years. That we've had a problem of exploitation of children for sex trafficking, a problem of labor trafficking in the United States for years, but it has not gathered attention. And this really is a form of modern-day slavery. These people are not independent, but they are controlled or manipulated by criminals who then sell those services that these people provide again and again and again. It is extraordinarily exploitative and shocking that it happens in our country. In the last few years, and I would say thanks largely to the efforts of Cindy McCain and some of the people on the podium or on the stage with her today, the awareness level about human trafficking in the United States has shot up. There is a much greater sensitivity to this. We have made tremendous progress in strengthening legislation, empowering law enforcement, supporting social services. We have made extraordinary progress in bringing technology to the challenge of fighting human trafficking to get us ahead of the game a bit more. This is what we mean as a McCain Institute by being a do tank, is trying to pick an issue where we can try to help make a difference. And it is fitting, therefore, that in the first of our discussions today, it's going to be focused on this area of human trafficking, where the leadership of Mrs. McCain has helped make such a difference in moving this issue along over the past couple of years. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Mrs. McCain to introduce the members of the panel here today. Thank you very much for coming. We're looking forward to a great day. Mrs. McCain.
Thank you. Good morning. I welcome all of you from your various states to Arizona. I'm sorry that we've not lived up to our sunshine promise to all of you, but certainly by game day we will. Thank you for joining us, especially on this issue. All of the issues that the McCain Institute and the Super Bowl group are putting on this week are important. This one is equally so. And you are right now sitting in a state that 18 months ago had no legislation, had no interest per se, and really had no ability to be effective in stopping this. Now you are sitting in a state that I believe is safe and on the move and on the hunt for traffickers. So if there are traffickers coming into Arizona, our Greater Phoenix Human Trafficking Task Force is going to find them and going to arrest them. It's a remarkable change of time for us. It's a remarkable opportunity for a state to really get together in partnership with every NGO, every state legislator, the AG, the governor, everybody. We're all on board together. So I welcome all of you. Sitting on the stage, you have, in my opinion, the rock stars of this topic. These are people that not only have made a difference, but continue to make a difference and won't let up on those who don't want to play with us. So I'd like to briefly introduce everybody. I know many of you probably know them, but I'm just honored to be on the stage with these people and being able to talk about this issue and being able to offer the opportunity for exchange between all of us. Anyway, right here on my left, our first panelist is Letty Ashworth. She is the Director and Chairman of Global Diversity for Delta Airlines. And their airline, as you know, has been the front runner on this issue in terms of trying to stop it, making their employees aware of it, and they're becoming active in the issue as well. Letty, welcome, and thank you for coming. Next to Letty is Marilyn Carlson Nelson, and I know most of you, her name precedes her. She is so well known in so many different areas, business, philanthropy, world affairs, the list goes on and on and on for Marilyn. We're very grateful that you're here, and we're very grateful that you would participate in such an important event for us. And certainly last but not least, I feel like that show on Fox, you know, what, Outnumbered? John Ryan, the head of NCMEC, and for those of you who don't know what NCMEC is, it's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. A very key player in this issue, a very key group of people that have just done remarkable work, but we have so much more to go. Welcome, John. Thank you for being here. I want us to have a conversation, and I want to have a conversation with our folks in the audience. So I would like to open it up with each of you talking about what you do, why you do it, more importantly, and we'll go from there. So if you don't mind, Letty, would you like to start?
Sure. And first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for such a kind and gracious introduction, and thank you for once again allowing us to be a part of what I think is not only a local conversation, but a global conversation, as you know. And for those of you who aren't familiar with some of Delta's work specifically, and certainly the folk on the stage can attest that Richard Anderson, a number of years ago, didn't hesitate to step up as CEO of course, I have to say one of the world's greatest airlines, if not the best. But he stepped up and basically said, it is the morally right thing to do, and that is to get engaged in this fight against human trafficking and bring awareness to what is now what we know to be a pandemic. In earnest, I would say approximately 2011, we were the first and only airline to sign on to the ECPAT code. And ECPAT is End Child Prostitution Against Human Trafficking, an NGO that now serves communities across the globe, and I've had the opportunity to attend several meetings across the world with the group. And what we do as part of our partnership with ECPAT is we've signed on to a number of tenets, which includes putting in place a policy for our employees. We have put in place a number of measures in our supply chain contracts. We have engaged in training over the last 2 to 3 years, and I'm happy to say that our numbers are now beyond the 70,000 mark. We have trained more than 70,000 of our employees and some of our suppliers. And so part of that effort is ongoing, and you'll see more of it, and I'll share a little bit more throughout the conversation.
Good morning. First of all, I too want to say thank you. Talk about a doer, and I'd never heard that before, a do tank. That's pretty good. I guess that's what we'd all like to have. First of all, I feel a little bit like maybe we've jumped ahead for you and that we should take a step back. Trafficking, perhaps we really should use the word slavery, and it's very interesting that this December will be the 150th anniversary of the 13th Amendment, the Emancipation Proclamation. So when you walk into that stadium and say there's 100,000 people there, I guess it's about that size, 3 stadiums full of children, underaged children, averaging age 12, 13, 14, 3 stadiums full at this moment are being held against their will and used as many, on average, 4 to 8 times a day. This is an underground activity that does not take place over there, it takes place here. We can go state by state and tell you the size of the problem in your state. And it could be your children. Not one of us here doesn't have children that they love. Their own children, grandchildren, neighbors' children, nieces and nephews. Nobody is immune from somebody running away. Runaway children are vulnerable. There are vulnerable populations in our cities, people who have no adult that care for them. And these children, it is not cloak and dagger. These children can be seduced by someone who offers them love, and with an older man, a child runs away, somebody says, I'll take care of you. The next thing they know, they're being trafficked. In our case, some blonde-haired, blue-eyed Scandinavian children from Minnesota end up in Chicago, Philadelphia, Texas. Some people say somewhere around $150 billion of profit underground. It undermines all of our businesses. Illicit trade undermines the economy. It undermines the legitimate business that we do. And this isn't someone else's problem, it's ours. And it's simple enough for us as corporate leaders and community leaders to take the steps to raise awareness, to look at our supply chains. It's really adding language to our compliance before we're forced to do it. One of the things we do best in business is to acknowledge a problem and come together and deal with it. The ABA has established language so that we can just tell our people, this is illegal. To have sex with a child anywhere in some 48 countries of the world is illegal, and you can be incarcerated when you get home. So think tomorrow when you enter that stadium, 3 times the stadium full of children. We can do something about it, but only if we work together across the sectors.
Well, thank you. And Cindy, thank you for putting this event together. And Cindy's been a champion, not only in the human trafficking arena, but if you look at all the issues that are on the agenda today, it demonstrates the scope and proactive stance that the McCain Institute is taking in critical areas. A little bit about the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. We're not your typical NGO. We were created over 30 years ago as a public-private organization. On the public side, we have actually 22 law enforcement agents drawn from the FBI, the U.S. Postal Service, U.S. Marshals, Secret Service, every federal agency that is focusing on child exploitation and missing children are actually assigned at an NGO working cases alongside our analyst. On the private side, we are fortunate to have some of the world's largest companies support our mission, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, and you may see a trend there. Many of them obviously are technology-oriented companies. There's a reason for that. These crimes against children are being facilitated, and the platforms for abuse are the social media platforms. The dynamic has changed. You won't see these minors who are being trafficked typically, on the street corners anymore, or at the other stations that, traditionally you would expect to see them. They are now invisible, as has been said, and they are invisible because the trafficking is being facilitated through online classified services such as Backpage, where anyone can go online from the privacy of their room, whether it be a hotel room or their home, and instead of ordering a pizza, they can order a minor for the purposes of engaging them in sexual exploitation. A few figures, because everyone is driven by data. Over 400,000 children were reported missing last year. At the National Center, we receive reports from every one of those missing children cases. What we have found is that a missing child is now likely to be an exploited child. From our data, which I can stand behind, 1 in 6 children reported missing are likely to be exploited. 1 out of 6. We received, last year alone, over 10,000 reports of children being trafficked for sex. So what is our role to play here? It's great to have data, but we're not into the research business. We are utilizing that data to help identify the children and help identify the predators and pimps who are engaged in this egregious behavior. For example, events like this. In preparation for this event, over the last few months, our analysts have been collecting what we call files on children who might be trafficked in this area during this time span, and we feed that information to investigators who are here in the field, and they are looking for those children and those predators. One of the beauties of the public-private organization is we can leverage tools that are given to us from these leading technology companies to help us connect the dots. We can track a child who may go missing in California, but the nature of this business, unfortunately, is they try to stay under the radar. So they're not going to stay in California. They're going to travel cross-country. So it's a daunting challenge for law enforcement. There's 18,000 law enforcement agencies. How do they have visibility of what's going on? They get it through us because we see the big picture. So we will supply law enforcement as these children are going from city to city that are likely to be the final stop this week, maybe here in Phoenix. And I know Cindy is working closely with the organizations that are, working with the law enforcement community. We actually have a command center in our headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia, 24/7, direct contact to the task forces that are working this week to have the eyes and ears and hopefully bring some of these children home. You see the bag I have next to me. We call this the hope bag. When these children are recovered, what are they wearing? They're wearing the garb of the uniform that the predators gave them. The first step to the journey of recovery and getting their lives back is to strip them of that uniform and to give them the basic necessities that they need to recapture their childhood. And this is a concerted effort, and I'm proud to be here with my colleagues, because it truly is a public-private effort, and we need your help. You are our eyes and ears.
Thank you. I have a question. Why should any of the corporations or any business, any nonprofit, why should we care about this? Is this something that we can really stop, or are we just swinging in the wind here? Anybody?
Well, it's the perfect example of the gentleman on the beach saving one, right? Can we stop it? I don't know. Can we certainly slow its growth? It's fastest growing. Drug trafficking, armament used to be the second, and trafficking in human beings was the third. Now it's moved up to being the second largest underground activity, and we understand that even some of the gangs have moved from trafficking in people to trafficking in drugs, from trafficking in drugs to trafficking in people, because they can reuse the people and there have been fewer prosecutions, so we're working on that. But why should we care? Partly because now you know. I always felt that when I first heard in our business, travel and hospitality, we had been working with the Queen of Sweden on something. We had created a foundation called the World Childhood Foundation, working with street children around the world, homeless street children. And it became so clear that these children were, again, these were the vulnerable children. These children were being picked up and disappearing. So we decided that we had to do something, and we discovered in our particular industry that we had a platform, because often they're trafficked across borders, they're trafficked, so airplanes, they use hotels, they use motels, that this isn't a third-party thing. It actually happens, many of us, as Letty knows, and Delta and others in our industry, that unwittingly we can provide a platform and be a participant. So it was really imperative that we take a step. But it's so simple for you. I don't think you can protect your children if you don't protect others. I think for you to add language, one of our companies is Carlson Wagonlit Travel, and we are the largest corporate travel company in the world. And we asked our businesses, our corporations, and many, thank you if some of you are doing business with us, we've asked if we could just simply put language on the electronic itineraries when you're going to a place that is particularly known for trafficking. And really all but one of our corporate clients agreed to let us do that. And the language is just a simple paragraph that talks about the fact that this is illegal in any country to participate in sex with minors, or with, I'd like to use the word children. Minors is not an emotional word, with children. And that you can be incarcerated when you come back, but just simply, please, if you see something, say something. And there's a number, you have some pens, I'm gonna give you a number, 888-373, you probably have a number too, 7888. 888-373-7888. This is an organization called Polaris. It's funded in part by Health and Human Services. They work with several of the different U.S. agencies. Anywhere in the United States, if you call that number, that's what we have our managers do when we train our hotel people. They don't confront anyone. We don't urge you to confront anyone. Simply call the number and they will handle it. They answer in many languages. If a trafficked child calls the number, they will try to move to rescue the child. They probably work with others in the industry to identify where and to pick up that child. Or in our case, we've made calls that actually have ended up by incarcerating a pimp, incarcerating a John, and saving children. And for you, I think you're thinking to yourself, how do I even talk to my people about this? Well, I remember walking on a stage when I first realized that we had to do something. We had 2,000 people from all over the world. We'd had a fabulous year. We were celebrating, it was in the Caribbean. They were doing that wonderful parade dance everybody does. And then I was supposed to come out and close the conference. And I knew that I was going to tell these 2,000 people that there were human beings who were using children, and that it was demeaning to all of us, and that we could do something about it. I almost backed out. I thought, this isn't the time or place. They've already got a woman CEO. Now she's going to start talking about sex trafficking. But I ended up walking out. They had built the platform right out into the middle of this audience. And I swallowed hard and went. And you could have heard a pin drop. And then finally people were standing up. The engagement, the people who said, I'm so proud of being in a company that cares about this. Suppliers who said, how can we help? We're eager to work with you on getting the language right. The legal community, who at first had been hesitant, saying, working with ABA now to get language that we as corporate leaders can put into our policies. I promise you, instead of feeling embarrassed and awkward, you will be empowering and enabling in a world that people want to do good. They want to do what's right. They want to help. We want the world to be a better place for our kids. This is something we can attack and we can work together on.
One of the questions that you and I were talking about this last night, Letty, was about the corporate policies and the internal policies with regards to employees. What was it that, because you guys are tough, and that's, in my opinion, a good thing, but talk to us about those kinds of things within Delta and just your attitude and why you got to this point with regards to how you manage it.
Sure, and I think Maryland really,
I
you know,
agree.
it was a jump-off point because we thought it important to get the attention of our employees first. I don't think there, you know, to your latter question, and I'll continue with this question. I don't think there's a secret sauce of if we need to get involved. Is there some, you know, topical, you know, dissertation that we need to put together on this? It's just wrong to exploit another human being.
I think it's child abuse.
And to that, we have a moral obligation. And again, I think we talked about, we're not the moral police, nor are our corporations, but we do have an obligation as human beings to each other to at least try to impact a social condition that didn't just start, but we have to at least acknowledge it and apply some remedy. And so part of our efforts, we began with a policy that says, you know what, you will not engage in this activity as an employee of the company, whether you're on the clock or off the clock. And I think that sort of pushes the envelope because it also says, while we know that you don't work for us, well, technically 24 hours a day, you still are responsible to the tenets of what we stand for as a global citizen. And so as a part of that policy, it specifically states you can get terminated for activity that is not aligned with what our CEO has put forth. We have a flight plan. We lead to that flight plan. We follow to that flight plan in every facet, every level, and every single person is responsible from the bottom up and from the top down. And that's why we love what we do, and that we're so happy to be a part of an organization that respects that kind of leadership.
Well, what is you know, we're here because of the Super Bowl, and we've talked about this with many of you. It doesn't stop here. It's not just a Super Bowl issue, is it? Is it I mean.
No, it's a great point. It's a daily issue. There are an inventory, and you hate to use that term, but on an annual basis of 300,000 plus endangered runaways. These are the children who are running from a bad situation, whether it be neglect or abuse in their own household, but they don't know where they're running to. They're just getting away from a bad situation. And unfortunately, the pimps and predators are very, you know, keen in identifying their potential victims. And they actually recruit them in schools and in malls. Our office is adjacent to Fairfax County, which is one of the most high wealth and considered one of the best school districts in the country. Over a 4-year period, there was an investigation led by the FBI and a task force that uncovered minors being recruited at the school by gangs by their peers under, the umbrella of gangs. And what were they looking for? They would learn who was having a problem at home. They would learn who was looking for, someone to talk to about their problem. They were looking for the basic love and affection maybe they were not getting where we would all hope they would get it within their home. And the process is, first, telling them what they, need to hear. Someone cares about you, and they demonstrate that. They buy them clothes, they buy them jewelry, they introduce them to an exciting lifestyle. These are kids who are still going to school, going home, but in that interim, their after-school activities was not the traditional after-school activities. They were in local hotels being trafficked for sex because that love and affection soon became intimidation and even violence. And that was going on for 4 years. And the lessons learned from that are many. We know that educators spend the most time with our children. They are in a position to observe certain signs and symptoms that may lend itself to this problem. And one of the things that the National Center does is to make sure that we provide educational curriculums to the schools that will not only help the educators, but the children and the teens. We're talking about teens also, up to 17. The danger is particularly hard with teens because I had one. She thought she knew it all, and she was technically adept. She taught me how to go use the internet, but of course she didn't have the same life experiences or awareness of potential threats. We need to share that information, and we look to parents to have that discussion. We have a program called Take 25 every May, which is Missing Child's Month in America. We ask parents to take 25 minutes of your time, sit down, have a table conversation, not a alarming or fearful conversation, but ask, how are you using the internet? Who are you interacting with? Do you know who you truly are interacting with? What type of information are you providing? Predators are lurking in social media forums for children who give their names, they give their age, they give their activities, their schedule. They accumulate all that information, pose as a trusted, friendly peer, and lure some of our children offline to a world they're totally unaware of and unprepared for. So that's how you can be engaged. Ask what your school is doing. They should have an internet safety program that includes awareness of these challenges. And it's incumbent upon us as parents to have those discussions as well. We just did a 9-year study on attempted abductions, over 10,000 reports. And from that information, we were able to glean when these attempts were likely to happen. No surprise, when a child is either going to school or returning from school or a school activity. 60% of the time of an attempted abduction, that is when the attempt is made. What's the profile of the predator? A male, no surprise there, in a car. But what are the common lures? Showing a pet, a puppy, to get them to the car, asking directions. But most importantly, how were children able to get away and prevent that abduction? And we have the reasons cataloged. They kicked, they fought, they screamed. A Good Samaritan got involved. So we give this information now in a program called Kid Smarts for K through 5, and teachers can have that discussion. What to look for. It's animated. It's in an entertaining and engaging format. You don't scare kids. We educate them.
You know,
You
some
just
of the,
scared me.
yeah.
This face is scary. I have a team that does it.
But you know,
ahead.
I think that other things that we can do, because I think you'll run into more and more people who say, how can I engage? Several things. First of all, advocacy, safe harbor laws. Cindy has done a marvelous job in the whole McCain team here. When she said they've changed laws, all the states do not yet have safe harbor laws. So there are still states, you can check on your own, that where children, no matter what age, who are rescued, so to speak, are treated as criminals, not victims. So they don't go into the whole social service rehabilitation. They actually get incarcerated. That's wrong. And yesterday or the day before in the House of Representatives, a couple bills passed to try to create a sort of federal model so that states would step up to doing what in fact is happening here. So you can become an advocate for the right laws. You can create awareness with the people around you. You can, with your philanthropy or your community engagement, there isn't a community I'm aware of that has enough beds. These children have been, have used drugs. They've kind of lost their whole self-confidence. Somebody described it once as a butterfly where someone has just pulled pieces out of the wings, and they need more than being sent to a shelter. They need a whole array, a team of services to help to rehabilitate them, and we don't have that kind of beds. So
Should we
whether
arrest
you work
them?
with your United Way, what?
Should we arrest them?
Arrest the children? Absolutely not. I mean, that's the travesty. We have to train the police, another area. We can deal with it in a cross-sector way. That's what Cindy's done here in Arizona that is just such a model. We're doing in Minnesota, I think it's happening in Atlanta, where it's from the top down, but it's from the bottom up, where the community, in Minnesota, we have a whole program now that's being institutionalized. Minnesota girls are not for sale. So we've trained the police, we've trained the bus drivers, we've trained the hospitals and the health providers. We don't want the malls, we don't want our children to be abducted or to fall into this terrible, terrible circumstance. And so I think that there's many ways that you can take your energy around this. And I think the only way to protect our own is to help protect others.
Well, one of the things that people say to me every day is, well, oh, really? Yeah, I mean, the whole issue is kind of, ew, I don't want to talk about that. So part of our job has been to make people understand that this is not only an important issue, it's a deadly issue within your own community and within your own corporate circles. This is child abuse. The perpetrators of this, both the traffickers and the customers, are child abusers. Make no mistake what this is. When it is treated as such, then that's exactly how we will respond to it. There are divides. I asked the question about arresting. There's divisions on this because some communities, as you said, don't have enough beds to support these children, so arresting them is the only way to keep them safe and to keep the pimp outside the wall. But with all of that said, what do we do as corporate citizens in this? How can we partner with this? How can we make a difference collectively and make sure that this is not just a local or regional plan, that it is a national plan that we have partnered on and we have become intent on making it work? How do we do this?
Well, I love both of the comments that were just made because one of the things this isn't new. I think we've now packaged it and put this name, human trafficking, on it, slave labor. But I think it's been going on. I think we're starting to pay attention in ways that we were not paying attention, but we saw what was happening. It's the see something, say something perspective. And I think back, and I think back on what you're saying, how we make our children vulnerable on the college campuses. Just to give you an example, I had a conversation with a few young ladies who found themselves unable to pay their tuition. 4-year upscale college campus. And so they become vulnerable to that pimp or the person that's paying attention to them who says, I can pay for your tuition for the remainder of your time here. And so they may unwillingly or unknowingly walk into this trap that makes them vulnerable. So from a corporate perspective or from, other organizations, how are we tracking or paying attention to a person that comes into our offices or they're unable to pay for their tuition? Do we track what happens to that young lady if we don't see them? Or what do we do? It's the gaps like that I think corporations can fill. How do we support educational institutions and programs? Our particular company have oversight of mentoring programs, have oversight of talent pipelines for young people starting as early as 9th grade, so that we provide a place for them to come to, get them acclimated to what it means to work in a corporation, expose them socially, also support them in their educational endeavors so that they know they have a place to come to and that there's someone paying attention. So I think it gets granular. I think it's individual. I think it's boots on the ground. And I think we have to take it that serious. It's to say, you know what, I'm going to invest in you and I'm going to track you and I'm going to follow you and I want to know who your friends are, and it doesn't have to be my sister, but it can be my neighbor's child, it can be my niece, it can be my neighbor, but you have to take it that serious. And I think that's how you get involved.
Well, it's also something, also something simple, like putting a training program on your internal websites. too.
Absolutely.
I know you've done that, Marilyn, with yours, and I know Delta's done it.
Well, depending on, just look at your organization. It may be your sales group that needs to be particularly trained because they travel more broadly, and they can become ambassadors. I've taught a class in global corporate citizenship at the business school at the university, and one young man came up to me and said that he travels for his company, and when he goes to Thailand, he almost wants to, he's a young father, and he wants to eat dinner in his room because if he goes out, they keep offering, someone's nodding, offering him children, and if he turns it down, they just keep bringing him younger children. And he just feels, he said, what can we do? So we went to their CEO, but the question is, can we collectively support the organizations? Can we do advocacy for the laws? And also, we have this, because we're at Super Bowl and we're particularly speaking about sex trafficking, and I think, which is really where John and his organization are. But trafficking is an umbrella word that also has to do with anyone who is held against their will, who can't quit, who's been either seduced or threatened to work. And so the other piece of trafficking is labor trafficking. And so one of the things that we're being urged to do is to work with our supply chains, because we know that there's brand risk. If somewhere in our supply chain we discover that that slave labor is being used to produce our product, we know that not only our employees, but certainly the millennials don't want to buy our products if they're being made with slave labor. We know that often the slave labor actually also has this component of sexual abuse. Think of it. Some 40% of the people who go to Cambodia to see Angkor Wat are actually going to buy little children. There are men who show up at the orphanages and mistakenly say, can you show me your children? They buy the children. They can rent them for a month, they can buy them. These are things that are outside of our frame of reference, but they can't be any longer because we're stakeholders. So work with the supply chain, work with public-private partnerships. It doesn't have to be expensive. There are groups who can identify for you the places that your supply chain could be vulnerable if some of your subcontracting, second, third level subcontracting is tending to be vulnerable. It's surprising how much change you can make when you become aware of this. I saw Cindy start how many years ago now, and what she's done in every circle. Same thing with Letty and what Delta's done. It's, I guess right sometimes does make might, and this is no question about being right.
I feel like a chihuahua sometimes. I run around Phoenix in the nation biting people's ankles till they listen to me, you know. And then when they do, it turns out to be a really good thing. But it's I think educating all of our corporate citizens and our citizens, just not only that it exists, but it exists right here. It's not in Cambodia, although it is. But for those of us in the United States, the important aspect right now are these children right here and how we stop it. Letty, I know we've talked about plenty of times, and John as well, you're in an airport and you see maybe a middle-aged woman and she's got 4 little girls. They don't really look alike, and the little girls are kind of looking down. They're getting ready to get on an aircraft. What can we do? What do you do when you see something like that? John? I mean, I know, I'm sorry, but you know, when you, we as citizens, when we see it, what do we do?
We encourage what we call, first for the minor, the child, to seek a trusted adult. That could be, in that environment, it could be a TSA agent, it could be an attendant with one of the airlines, and by doing that, we hope that agent then, who has that opportunity to intervene, that they have the training to ask the right questions.
Well, for those of us, though, my gut tells me it's wrong. I think it's wrong, but should I get involved? You know, and what if it's just a mother and 4 of her grandchildren and they're all really tired? What if I've made a mistake? Is it wrong to talk to somebody?
There's no
to turn
mistake.
it in?
You want to err on the side of, potentially intervening before some harm is actually done to a child. And one of the challenges, was mentioned earlier, and I've seen it, in the lead up to an event like the Super Bowl. If you listen to the radio ads, the good news is they're educating, the public about the nature of this problem, and they're giving out phone numbers. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of that minor who may only have, a very limited opportunity to make one phone call or text one message, and they want to know they're getting that message in the right hands, and it's not going to be a dropped call. So one of the things, we've mentioned EPCAT, and we've mentioned Polaris. The good news is in the NGO community, we don't compete, we collaborate. I was with Brad Miles recently, the head of Polaris. I was with Carol Smolensky, the head of EPCAT. In preparation for this event, we wanted to make sure that we were not giving mixed messages, and we're not confusing the public or those who are being victimized. So we're about to release one number, 1-800-THE MISSING, 1-800-THE-MISSING. That is manned 24/7. I think I have a big mouth, so thank you. That's what I'm told at home. 24/7, we have analysts who can receive these calls and put that person in the right hands in a real-time fashion, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be a healthcare professional, whatever the resource. We are the clearinghouse for all of these resources. We have them at our fingertips. We have all the databases, the points of contact. It is our duty to make sure that if we get that call, that there is a response, and that child can be rescued. So this whole process that you've been a critical part of, Cindy and Letty and all my colleagues, 3 years ago, the level of awareness was almost negligible. We've now got 12 bills pending in Congress specifically dealing with sex trafficking issues. And the wonderful thing is many of them have bipartisan support. One bill was passed right before Congress took their winter recess, and it dealt with the problem of children missing from foster care. We learned that over 80% of children who went missing from foster care were also being exploited, and there was no duty for these agencies to even report these children missing. You talk about flying under the radar, nobody was looking for them. Bill was passed that all social service agencies, including foster care agencies, must report instances of missing children within 24 hours to both law enforcement and to the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children. We have the data that provides the leads that we can share with law enforcement. We know these children's proclivities. Many of them run away multiple times. Who are they associating with? Where are they going? Law enforcement can now respond and intervene before they are exploited. So the message is out there. You know, efforts, you know, by champions that I share this, you know, platform with are getting results. So we need you to help us continue spreading that message, both within your corporate environment as well as within your communities.
You know, maybe you've given me an idea, Cindy. I'm still sitting in that airport looking at those girls.
Yeah.
I think the number that I gave you, I think if I'm going to go back, and in addition to the language on our itineraries, you know, certainly we ought to arm our travelers with that number. I mean, because it'd be easy enough for us to just have it in our cell phone and be able to say, I'm here, I'm outside the gate, and I see, and because Polaris and will know who to contact. They'll know whether to contact Delta because somebody would be close. They have an increasingly sophisticated database, so that the caller, the service provider who answers the phone can pull up in very short time a lot of data about what to do about it.
Right.
And, you know, I think you're right, because walking by those situations, and it's probably not just a mom and some tired kids. You can see the difference. There's just a different relationship, even if they're not getting along or they're tired, between a parent and a family. Families just relate differently. And I think if you think back, there's just times when you've sat on an airplane and maybe there's a child that you just don't, nobody brought a toy, not clear about the name, the child is sullen and moved over to the other side of the seat, is not, there's just not a relationship. And I'm so glad now that, that those personnel at Delta will identify that. There was a time when they saw it, and they didn't know what to do, and they felt helpless. So
Tell us about that, Letty.
Well, and it's interesting because not only do they see it, I don't think, you know, it's in plain sight.
Right.
I think they saw it, but it's like, well, what does it mean? I don't even know that they were in that awareness phase.
Right, right.
And so the training became what I think easy because it was aligned with some of our corporate security protocols. And so it didn't take a lot of money. It took simply putting together, you know, something that says, okay, these are the things that you should look for.
Right.
And many of them are, again, consistent with, say, our unidentified minor program, which every airline has a similar program. We're going to make sure that that paperwork is consistent, that those names are correct. And I recall a time when I've been on or in that role or in a role that I've had to ask the questions.
Right.
And I found myself, and this was before we talked about human trafficking, asking not the adult, but asking the child, who's this and what's their relationship
Right,
with you? and waiting for a sufficient answer and not turning that child over to anyone that shows up at the gate.
Right.
And so those are the small incremental kinds of things too. And you mentioned, if you see it as a consumer, go to a person in authority who can then pick up the protocols. And it just doesn't happen on the ground.
No.
It happens in the air.
In
We
the
have
air.
protocols in place. Should there be the behavior exhibited on the plane, there are security measures in place to address it real time.
I'd like to open it to questions. There will be some people running around with microphones. Please, go ahead. There, she's right behind you with the microphone. There you go.
You mentioned 300,000 children roughly in the United States. I'm wondering approximately how many of those are the runaways that you identified, how many are abducted, and how many actually, I mean, you mentioned Cambodia, and you see signs on the streets about report, don't let children be taken. How many are just brought in from outside the United States? And finally, we address it only as a girl problem. But
boy
how many
problem.
are boys as well?
Go ahead.
Well, the 300,000 endangered runaway figure, first, those are U.S. Citizens, children. And with respect to the percentage, you're absolutely correct. The majority of victimization involves female, but from the data that we've compiled over the years, at least 5% of them are males. Now, what you have to put in perspective is sexual assaults in general, whether it be a minor or adult, or the least reported crime that we have. When you're dealing with minors, that number drops exponentially. When you're dealing with males, boys, it almost disappears. So that 5%, it's still 5% too many. But most boys, for a variety of reasons, are not reporting it.
We are looking to get more data. I think the granularity of your question is right on. In Minnesota, and I think you've done the same thing in Arizona, we did a study that tried to begin to identify pedophiles, identify, what you call survival sex, which is some of these street kids who have no food and who sell themselves, and then or how that moves into the more organized crime. But the data is it's very hard to come by, and I think that that the number has been arrived at in part by just multiplying, taking county by county, seeing the number of cases, and then somehow building it up from there. But I know we're getting better and better data, so I'm not sure what else you know about the data and how to parse it for the various.
Well, there's an ongoing research project right now that with the McCain Institute and ASU, and it is specific in it's dealing with the ads that are being placed on Backpage, and it's being compared to New Jersey, New York last year, et cetera. It goes on and on. But part of that is to determine exactly the topics that you just talked about. We really don't know. This is such a new field in terms of trying to determine just the things that you asked about, that we don't have enough data yet. And that's partly why we're very involved in data collection now, because it's an important part of this process so that we can better figure out how to fight this. I will say, if I may, and I'm going to open, for questions, obviously, but I will say that one of the things that you as corporate citizens can do in here is to fund things like that, because the more that we are able to understand this issue, and this is not an expensive project, but the more that we can understand it, the better off the NGOs are going to have in fighting this. So anyway, any more questions out there, please? Deb?
Well, good morning, everyone. And Cindy, thank you so much for organizing this day, this panel. And to all of you, thank you for your work. I'm Deborah Sigmund, founder of Innocence at Risk. And Cindy, you have brought this issue quite to the forefront and done a tremendous issue bringing awareness. We have been Innocence at Risk as rather like a pioneer. We've been working alongside Polaris since 2005, creating awareness, hosting events in Washington using embassies and throughout the United States. Through one of these events, a flight attendant came to us in 2008 and said, "We see what you're talking about, and we don't know what to do about it." So we were horrified. We heard stories of flight attendants seeing children get on planes without the proper clothing. They didn't have toys. They didn't have, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them looked drugged. So we produced a brochure along with Polaris. And Marilyn Carlson, you've been a real model in this as well with what you've done with the travel industry. So we've given this to the flight attendants. This was 2008, before Delta signed the Code of Conduct, and things have moved along quite extensively since then. But with one flight attendant, we had an army of angels working on this issue, reporting red flag situations, calling the national hotline number. The national hotline number in 2008 was not 24/7. They had to become this overnight. And they named the Flight Attendant Initiative. Knowing that we had countless thousands and thousands of flight attendants, I said, we can't train them all. We took this to Homeland Security. They established a direct protocol in 2009.
Wonderful.
In 2009. So we have received a tremendous amount of backup, which we have definitely needed. But the flight attendants are the first line of defense, and airline personnel. We have flight attendants from all airlines.
Deb, we have a number of questions in the back. Do you have a question?
Sure.
honey?
I just want to say that we have seen so much from these flight attendants, and we've learned so much. And there have been stories of boys that have been on planes, and it's tremendous. I'm around later and can talk to you about direct
Wonderful.
stories.
Wonderful. Thank
But
you.
thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. I thought I saw a hand back there. I'm sorry, Deb, if I didn't. Anybody? Oh, all right. What I'd like to do then before we close here is give you each an opportunity at a last message and how where we think we should go. Leave it to you. Tell them what you wanted.
I quickly would like to just say, for those who have been reluctant to get involved, you can get involved. There are many levels to get involved. If you want to get in the trenches by rescuing young men and young women, there's an opportunity. There are research opportunities, there are scholarship opportunities. There are ways to affect policy within corporations. There are ways to partner with NGOs. We have a number of strategic NGO partnerships, including Polaris and Missing and Exploited Children and ECPAT and the Global Business Coalition Against Human Trafficking. And so there are a number of ways to get involved. And so I would absolutely encourage you to just take the first step if you haven't already done so. And kudos to everyone who's been a part of this tremendous journey. And thank you to you and my fabulous colleagues.
Marilyn?
Well, I salute you all for being here. I think it's very impressive, Cindy, to take our love of sport and our enthusiasm about competition and take a little time at the same time to explore kind of who we are as citizens and how we can provide leadership rather than saying, why don't they do something about it? I think becoming a do tank, as you say, is really interesting. I guess some of my colleagues get tired of hearing the story, but I had an epiphany, so to speak, when my first grandson came home. And some of you can probably tell the story, but I did what a lot of grandmas do. I had a cradle upstairs waiting, and I asked my daughter to let me be the one to go up and get him out of his bed. And actually, he was a Super Bowl baby. He was born 22 years ago this week, the Saturday of Super Bowl. So finally, I heard him and he stirred, and so I went into the room, and the sun was coming up, and I took him out of his cradle, and the sun made it look like he had a halo around his head, and that special baby feeling up against your neck, and I just had this rush of love. I just didn't know I could feel so in love, you know, as I did when I held that child. And then I had this almost painful understanding that I couldn't protect him, that there wouldn't be walls high enough or locks strong enough to protect him against the children that had no one to take them out of their cradle. And I knew then that whatever I could give him or teach him or help him, that if I didn't spend some part of my time worrying about those who had no voice and had no one who cared, that they could meet somewhere on a battlefield or in a tall building or a schoolyard or a churchyard. And I just didn't want to ever be part of having that happen. So you asked at the beginning, why? Well, I look for ways, because I think when we take care of those others, it's the best way to say I love you to those who are closest to us.
Thank you.
I got mine. Thank you. Very well said. How you can help when you leave here. I think that's a great way to end this. We launched a program last week in Washington with an organization called ASIS International. It's the world's largest association of security professionals. They're drawn from corporate America. They're drawn from every sector, the airline industry, trucking, schools, malls, every company. You have security professionals who you know are there to safeguard employees, your environment, your trade secrets, but also they have the ability to be the eyes and ears to also be on the lookout for issues impacting missing and exploited children. The program is free. It was designed with the input of security professionals drawn from your respective organizations. It's available now on missingkids.com. It's a 40-minute program. It's also available through the Security Professional Association. Make that part of your orientation for your security team, because they have a wealth of experience. They have the ability to not only safeguard your employees, your proprietary information, but also our nation's children. Take advantage of that and make it part of your corporate culture. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. What a great way to start the day. And I just appreciate you all taking the time. These are really the rock stars in this, as I said earlier, on this issue. And I want to thank all of you who came out early to listen to us about this issue. The Super Bowl's not the reason this happens, but it is a catalyst. We right now are the epicenter for human trafficking. And so to be able to have a voice in talking to you about this, and most importantly, at the end of this, if you do choose to do something corporately on your ends, remember, the bottom line in all of this is that you are giving a voice to the voiceless around the world. So thank you for considering, thank you for listening to us, most importantly. There's some information in the back that Homeland Security has dropped off and some other things. And again, thank you for coming, and I so appreciate you listening. Thank you.